All right, welcome to the deep dive. You know how this works. We take a big topic, break it down, and give you those key insights so you can basically, well, just get up to speed fast.
Exactly. Cut through the noise, get to the good stuff.
Exactly. And today we're diving into Pathfinders by J.L. Collins.
Ah, J.L. Collins, a favorite.
It really is. It's a fascinating book. And what's so cool about it is it's not just theory, right? It's real stories, real people on their own journeys to financial independence, right? Financial
And
independence.
I think that's what makes this book, Pathfinders, so compelling. It takes, the framework, the groundwork laid out in his earlier work, The Simple Path to Wealth, and it shows you it in action, right? It's not just about what to do, but how people have actually done it. Like, these are real people with real lives, all sorts of different backgrounds.
Yeah, it's almost like it's like a living, breathing case study for the simple path to wealth, right?
Right. And what's really important to understand is that there's no one single right way to achieve FA. Like you said, all these people have different paths, different circumstances, different approaches. But what we're going to do today is extract, like those common threads, like what are those underlying principles that these pathfinders have embraced? Because, look, that's what we're all about here, right? Actionable stuff that you can apply in your own life.
And it's stuff you can use now.
Exactly.
Not wait till you're 65 or whatever.
Right. So let's jump right into it. I think one of the central themes that emerges from the book is this idea of financial independence as freedom, right?
Okay, so we're not just talking about having a pile of cash.
No, not at all. Of course, financial security is a huge part of it. Not having to worry about making ends meet, not being reliant on a paycheck just to cover your basic needs. That's massive. But it goes so much deeper than that. It's really about gaining control over your time, like the ability to choose how you spend this incredibly valuable resource.
I love how Collins starts the book off with this personal anecdote, right? So he was earning like 10,000 bucks a year in his first job, something like that, and managed to save 5,000.
Yeah, back in the day.
Back in the day, right? That was enough for him to backpack across Europe for a whole year.
And he wasn't even really aiming for full retirement at that point, right?
Yeah, he was just in his 20s, just starting out. But it really highlights the point that even those initial steps, those seemingly small savings, they can buy you a surprising amount of freedom.
Right. And a transformative experience. A year backpacking through Europe, that's amazing. And it kind of ties into this later realization he had, that really he was using his money to buy something even more valuable.
Like what?
Freedom. Freedom to live life on his own terms. And I think, the book also introduces this really powerful concept that I think a lot of people resonate with, which is this idea of what he calls, FU money.
I love it.
Right. Having enough, saved up that you can, basically have the power to walk away from a situation that's not serving you.
Yeah, it gives you options.
It gives you options, whether it's, a job that you hate or, any situation where you feel like you're stuck. FU money gives you that leverage.
And it's not even necessarily about quitting your job or anything drastic, right?
Yeah.
It's that mental shift, knowing that you have options.
Right. It's a feeling of empowerment.
Exactly. What decisions would you feel more confident making if you had that kind of, financial cushion beneath you?
I think that's a powerful question to ask yourself.
Totally. So building on this whole theme of freedom, one of the things that Pathfinders really hits on is what Collins calls the superpower of time.
Right. And the story of Uncle Mike is a really great example of that.
Yeah. Uncle Mike, retired engineer.
Living the dream.
Living the dream. And it's funny, he talks about how before FI, when he was working, his whole view of time was completely tied to his hourly wage.
Like time equals money, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Whether it was 40 bucks an hour or 60 bucks an hour, that was how he measured everything.
Yeah. But once he reached FI, that equation just kind of dissolved.
Oof.
Gone. Time was no longer something to be traded for money.
It became something.
It became this resource to be intentionally used.
Yeah.
Right?
It was his to decide.
Right. And he could focus on things that he truly valued, his relationships, his passions, his hobbies. There's this great story in the book where he talks about building a porch for his friends. He literally milled the lumber himself from trees on his property.
That is so cool.
And, he had the time and the freedom to do that because he wasn't tied to a job. And it kind of makes you think, what would you do with that kind of time? What are those passions or projects that you would pursue wholeheartedly if time wasn't such a constraint?
I love that question. And that's what makes Pathfinders so interesting, right? It shows you there's no one-size-fits-all approach to FI. Like, it's not a cookie-cutter thing.
Exactly. I mean, you look at this story of, they call him the seasonal worker, and Amanda, his partner. They have this really unique lifestyle, right? They work seasonally, and then they travel the rest of the year.
What's so cool about them is they've really designed their lives around their values, right?
Exactly. And they're on track to, like, surpass 7 figures in net worth, well before the traditional retirement age. It's really inspiring because it shows you that FI doesn't always have to be about, the traditional 9-to-5 grind for 40 years.
I love the advice I got from their dad. It was like, do the things you will most regret not doing. Like, that's so powerful.
So true. It reminds me of, like, when people are on their deathbed, one of their biggest regrets is not having, lived their life more fully.
Right. Like taking those chances.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's about making conscious choices, balancing those financial goals with, a desire for a life full of experiences.
It's not just about the numbers. It's about what those numbers allow you to do.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And, then you have stories like Jay Gonzalez's, who had, like, a completely different background.
Yeah, totally different perspective, right?
Grew up as, like, a migrant worker. So the idea of generational wealth, was totally foreign to them.
Never even heard of it, probably.
Probably not. But when they discovered FI later in life, it became this huge motivator for them, like leaving a better, more secure financial future for their kids.
It's a powerful story, right? Like, imagine growing up with that level of financial instability and then wanting something so much better for your own kids. And they were really intentional about it, Like, they maximized their retirement contributions, paid down their debt aggressively, invested consistently in, low-cost index funds.
Right. Like, they had this clear goal, and they had a plan to achieve it.
And you know what they did? They had these FI meetings. Like, they would sit down and review their progress, make adjustments if they needed to, which I think is a really cool takeaway for anyone listening. Like, it's not just about setting the goal. It's about actively tracking your progress towards it.
Right. Having a system and a plan.
Yeah.
And being accountable to it.
Yeah. Speaking of which, something that comes up again and again in Pathfinders is how crucial it is to get control of debt.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, debt is such a huge obstacle for most people on the path to FI.
It's like this invisible weight holding you back.
Right. And there's this quote in the book from Christie and Bryce, the authors of Quit Like a Millionaire, that really stuck with me. It was like, if you figure out money, life is incredibly easy. If you don't, life is insanely hard.
And the book really does a good job of showing just how hard it can be, right? Like that story about the Acura.
Oh, yeah. I mean, talk about bad timing. Their power steering goes out during a hurricane evacuation.
Yeah.
Talk about stress.
Nightmare. And because they were carrying debt, they had limited options. Like, their choices were so restricted.
It shows you how vulnerable debt can make you when something unexpected happens. And it always does.
And, it's not just about, like, big debts like mortgages or car loans.
Right. It's also about those smaller, everyday things.
Like, material stuff that you maybe don't really need, but you feel like you got to have.
Right. Those material cravings. And those can be so insidious because they can trap you in this cycle of, working more to buy more. And then you need to work more to maintain that lifestyle.
Yeah, you get stuck on this hamster wheel.
Exactly. And budgeting, budgeting is such a valuable tool for that.
It's not about, like, deprivation, is it?
Not at all. It's about, like, conscious spending, knowing where your money is going. And it can really reduce that anxiety, that financial stress that so many people feel.
I loved Anthony's story in the book. He grew up seeing, like, the consequences of debt and overspending.
Oh, yeah. Powerful story.
He saw what not to do with money, basically, and it gave him this really strong foundation for his own financial journey.
I think that's so important. We learn so much from our early experiences, whether good or bad.
For sure. And Anthony was really methodical about paying off his student loans.
Very disciplined.
Yeah.
Focused on the interest rates, right?
Yeah. He prioritized the loans with the highest rates first so he could, like, chip away at that debt faster.
Smart move. And I also like their strategy of focusing on the monthly debt service.
Yeah. That's a really interesting point, right?
It's not just about the total size of the loan or even the interest rate, but, like, how much you're actually paying each month.
Yeah.
Because that's what impacts your cash flow.
Makes sense. So you can identify those loans that, could really put you in a bind if your income suddenly changed.
Exactly. And they did all those little things too, right? Like warehouse club membership, challenging their phone bills, switching garbage haulers.
Yeah. All those little things add up.
They really do.
Okay, so we've talked about debt, but something else that Pathfinders really emphasizes is the importance of a high savings rate.
Absolutely. I mean, that's one of the biggest keys to reaching FI&I. Collins often talks about this sweet spot of saving 50% of your income.
50%, that seems like a lot.
It can be. But, what's interesting is his personal experience. He did it. He saved 50% even in his first job, making, a pretty modest income.
Yeah, that's crazy.
He said it didn't feel like deprivation. It was like a deliberate choice. He was buying his future freedom.
And starting early, right? Like that's when compounding really kicks in.
Oh, yeah. The power of compounding. Over time, it's unbelievable how much you can grow your wealth.
It makes me think about that story of Ken. I mean, he was making, bank, huge bonus, but his spending was also through the roof.
Yeah, $800,000 bonus. Gone.
Just gone. It's like that old saying, right? It's not about how much you make, it's about how much you keep.
Right. And then there's this couple, Joe and Allie Olson, public school teachers.
Yeah. Achieved early FEI.
Incredible story. Side hustles, frugal living, saving and investing like crazy. They did it. Shows you that you don't have to be a high earner to make it happen.
Yeah. And then there's frugal student. Like living debt-free on a student budget. Like, come on.
Talk about resourcefulness,
Yeah.
Walking instead of driving, no cell phone. Like you said, just really prioritizing needs over wants.
Making those tough choices. And it paid off.
It did. And another important theme that we see throughout Pathfinders is this need for flexibility. Like life throws curveballs. Things change.
Yeah, your plan's got to be adaptable.
Exactly. Like you see that with Bruno Bontempi's story. He went from like this high-powered tech career to volunteer work and then eventually retired comfortably in a lower cost of living area.
Yeah. That's that geo-arbitrage thing, right?
Exactly. Moving to a place where your money goes further. And, his savings rate wasn't even like super high by FI standards.
Let's just stretched it further.
Right. And then there's this concept of coasting, where your investments are doing the heavy lifting, even if you're not contributing as much.
Ah, the magic of compounding at work again. And then you have John and Sarah Grafton. Went to Silicon Valley to boost their income, but then later prioritized family and moved somewhere more affordable.
Right. They had the flexibility to make those choices because they weren't like financially trapped.
Yeah.
And they kept their lifestyle inflation under control even when they were making a lot more.
That's so key. And that actually brings us to a really important point, which is this whole thing about lifestyle inflation.
Oh, it's such a threat. It's so easy to fall into the trap of, spending more as you earn more.
Yeah, keeping up with the Joneses, right?
And it can completely derail your progress towards FI.
JSD or just some dude. His story is really relatable, right? Like he started out super frugal, but then as his life changed, got married, moved to a safer neighborhood, started a family.
He adjusted, right?
Yeah, and sometimes you have to.
Right, finding that balance. It's not about deprivation. It's about making conscious choices.
Yeah. And I loved Laura Rojo Eddy's attitude, She was just indifferent to all that more, bigger, better, newer stuff.
Totally. Like, it just didn't matter to her.
Yeah. Like, they bought a starter home that they've now paid off, drive their cars until they die, spend their money on travel and experiences.
And Mark talks about how they're always trying to, manage lifestyle inflation.
Which is tough, right? Especially with kids.
Yeah. Activities, clothes, all that stuff adds up.
And there's that whole thing about, living in a safe neighborhood.
Yeah. And they actually made the decision to move to a more expensive neighborhood after this scary incident.
Because safety was a priority.
Right. And sometimes those things do cost more. It's about finding that balance, like we said.
Totally. Okay, so let's shift gears and talk about, the actual nuts and bolts of investing.
Okay, good stuff.
Right. So the book is a big advocate for low-cost index funds.
Yep. Classic J.L. Collins.
Totally. And he specifically recommends, a total stock market index fund, like VTSAX.
The beauty of index funds,
Yeah.
right? They're simple, low fees.
Yeah.
You get instant diversification across the entire market.
And historically, they've outperformed most actively managed funds over the long term.
Right. You're essentially buying the whole market
Yeah.
instead of trying to pick individual winners.
Yeah. No need to be a stock picker.
Right. And another really important point that Pathfinders drives home is that you have to be prepared for market downturns.
Which are inevitable, right?
Yeah, they're going to happen. But the key is not to panic and sell everything when things get rough.
Right. Don't freak out.
Stay the course.
It's like that Warren Buffett quote, right? Be fearful when others are greedy and be greedy when others are fearful.
Exactly. When the market drops, it's a buying opportunity.
Yeah. And, there are a lot of stories in the book that kind of serve as cautionary tales about, trying to time the market or picking individual stocks.
Oh, yeah. Alex from Australia. He learned that lesson the hard way.
Lost money trying to pick winners.
Yep. And Nathan McBride, he took control of his investments, got rid of his financial advisor, and just simplified everything down to an S&P 500 index fund.
Took matters into his own hands.
And MB's journey is really interesting, too. They started out with like these high-fee advisors and underperforming mutual funds.
Yeah.
And then they like discovered Vanguard and index funds. It's like a light bulb went off.
And MB was initially confused about how the Thrift Savings Program worked, the TSP.
Yeah.
But they learned about the different funds and ended up going all in on the C fund, which is basically the S&P 500.
It's really inspiring to see people like take control of their finances and make these informed decisions.
And I think we should mention the 4% rule, right? Which is something that comes up a lot in FI circles.
Yeah, it's a really useful guideline. Basically, it suggests that, once you reach FI, you can safely withdraw about 4% of your portfolio each year, adjusted for inflation, without, running out of money.
So it gives you that sense of security. Okay, so we talked about this concept of FU money earlier, and I think it's worth revisiting because the book makes it clear that it's so much more than just financial security.
Right. It's like this psychological superpower. It gives you options.
Yeah, like Laura C. in London.
Yeah.
She used her FU fund to support herself when she was going through some, mental health challenges.
And that's the thing, right? It's not just about the money. It's about that peace of mind, that freedom from worry.
Yeah. Brian Griesbach called it the ultimate stress reduction device.
I love that.
Right. And there's a story in the book about this couple who felt like they were, owned by their employer because they were in so much debt.
Yeah, trapped.
And as they started building up their FU money, it totally shifted their mindset.
Like they went from feeling powerless to feeling empowered.
Right. Proactive, resilient, like they were in control. And, there's this really cool piece of advice in the book, which is to think about, what you would do if you were already financially independent.
I love that.
Yeah. And then, see if you can incorporate some of those things into your life right now.
Little steps.
Exactly. Even if it's just a small thing, it can make a big difference.
And there are so many examples in the book of people who have used their FU money to make major life changes.
Yeah.
Like quitting their jobs to start businesses, going back to school, traveling the world.
Living their dreams. And that's what FI is all about, right? Freedom. Okay, so finally, Pathfinders really emphasizes the importance of persistence, right? Like staying the course because, let's be real, it's not always easy.
Yeah, there will be bumps in the road. Life happens.
And the book references Yuval Noah Harari's concept of the universal trust in money.
Right. Money is this shared belief system that allows us to, function in society.
And when you have your financial house in order, it can give you this sense of stability even when things are chaotic around you.
Yeah, like a solid foundation.
Yeah.
And the book also encourages us to maintain a positive outlook.
I mean, it's true, right? For all its challenges, this is a pretty amazing time to be alive.
Yeah, we have so many opportunities. And there's also that important reminder to avoid overcomplicating things.
Especially when it comes to investing, right?
Right, keep it simple. Index codes, long-term investing.
Don't try to get fancy.
Exactly. And, Artem Voronov, he had this crazy experience in Russia going through massive economic and political turmoil.
Yeah.
And it just reinforced for him the importance of saving and investing, no matter what's going on in the world.
Yeah, you can't control everything, but you can control your own finances.
And Collins himself is very honest about, the ups and downs he's faced in his own life.
Job changes, financial setbacks, it happens to everyone.
But staying the course is key.
Oh.
And, there are stories in the book about unexpected expenses, like infertility treatments, job loss.
And being on that path to FI gave these people a buffer, you know?
Yeah. It helped them weather those storms.
I loved Lisa from Baltimore's story. She wanted to reach FI before her youngest turned 18.
And she's teaching her kids about money, too, which is so important.
Right, setting them up for success. And then you have Anthony St. Clair and his family. They wanted to travel the world for a year with their kids.
Another amazing story.
And they actually achieved it. It's inspiring to see how FI can facilitate those kinds of, extraordinary life experiences.
And Collins talks about how his mom encouraged him to, embrace freedom rather than clinging to safety.
Yeah, don't be afraid to step outside your comfort zone. And it's interesting how, a lot of the people in the book who achieved early retirement, they ended up finding, new passions, new ways to contribute.
Like volunteering in elder care?
Yeah, things they never would have had time for before.
And there's this interesting story about someone who, completely ignored their finances until they had this like major life event that forced them to like finally face reality.
And then they discovered the simple path. It's never too late.
Really, never too late. And there's some good advice in there too about, as you get closer to retirement, keep what you've got. Don't take unnecessary risks.
Yeah, play it safe. And I loved Leger's story from Germany. He reached FI and then realized he actually missed working.
Really?
Yeah, and he also realized the importance of, like, social connection, being part of a community.
Yeah, it's not just about the money, right? It's about finding that balance in life.
Totally. And to wrap it all up, the book ends with this really insightful conversation between Collins and his daughter, Jess.
Oh, that was great.
Right. Like, initially, Jess wasn't really into finance.
It can seem intimidating.
But she ended up adopting the simple path. And it's been working great for her.
Because it aligns with her values. Right.
Totally. Like, she just wants to live her life without constantly thinking about money.
And the simple path gives her that freedom.
And they talk about this whole concept of living within your means.
Right. Which they illustrate with that parable about the monk and the minister.
The monk who's happy with very little.
And the minister who's always striving for more.
And it's so relevant today, right? With social media and all the pressure to consume.
Oh my gosh, yes. It's a constant barrage of ads and influencers telling you that you need to buy more stuff.
And, they talk about the generational differences, too. Like, college debt is such a huge burden for young people today.
It wasn't always like that.
And it's changing the whole financial landscape.
Right. But the beauty of the simple path is that it's timeless.
It works, regardless of your circumstances.
And what's so cool is that Jess is just stuck with it.
Yeah.
No deviations. Because it works for her.
Yeah. It's not complicated. And she started early, too, which has given her a huge advantage.
Right. The power of compounding again.
And it's worth pointing out that Collins himself practices what he preaches, right? He's careful about lifestyle inflation.
Yeah. He makes sure his spending doesn't get out of control.
And I think it's really cool how they talk about the power of storytelling.
It makes these ideas come alive.
Makes them relatable, right?
It's so much more engaging than just reading like a dry textbook.
Totally. So I guess, the big takeaway from Pathfinders is that FI is possible, like for anyone.
It's not some pipe dream. It's achievable even if you don't have a high income or you're starting later in life.
It's about intentionality. It's about saving. It's about managing debt. It's about investing wisely.
And it's about finding a path that aligns with your values, right?
Right. So for all you listeners out there, which of these stories, which of these principles resonates with you?
What's your why?
Exactly. And maybe a better question is, what's one small step that you can take, like right now, to get a little closer to that freedom?
That's the question.
It is. And if you're ready to dive even deeper into the principles behind all this, check out The Simple Path to Wealth.
Another classic.
Thanks for joining us.
Until next time.